saw me speaking to myself, which I'm doing right now into the camera. Hello, my name is Brian, and this is Transparency and Merit. The show, this title is called Oprah and the White Privilege Narrative. And I want to get into kind of the start of Oprah Winfrey when she started like on the main stage. I mean, she began a syndicated show in Chicago, but I think it was, they say on the Wikipedia page, around 1986 is when she began to like be on like for an hour on the whole main stage kind of thing, and she began her talk. And her views on racism and race were rather moderate. She even one time had. I remember she had a white racist who a black had befriended her, and people had called in and saying, "Why don't you have any black racists on?" And she said she responded to that saying, I don't know why, but black people can be racist. So she at one time believed that anyone can be racist. She used to believe that. I don't think she believes that anymore, just because of the white privilege narrative that has been foisted upon across the establishment, and the establishment is behind the white privilege narrative. Now, and one of the things I've always remembered is anytime they had views on racism and race, they never had anybody with opposing views to the left. And it's gone further and further down the rabbit hole of like only white people can be racist, which basically absolves blacks and other people of color of moral responsibility to act, politely and appropriately, And because, like I said, I remember Phil Donahue, he would always have guests on. Now, he didn't agree with the guests, and he was more transparent with his beliefs, but he would always have guests on that would go against the mainstream narrative or the mainstream leftist narrative of the white privilege narrative, and it's kind of morphed into white privilege, I believe, because, and this view has been around since the 60s, and it started to really gain traction in the late 1980s and then in the 1990s. Just from my perspective, I could be completely wrong on this, but I'll just go a little bit of my own personal history on I've been a movie fan and a television, talk show nut for years, and I've seen this play out for quite some time. And Oprah and her Oprah's narrative has been unchallenged. I mean, went unchallenged for years, primarily. Had Oprah Winfrey come about during the age of social media, her views would not have gained the kind of traction they did, because basically the mainstream media was on board with this kind of philosophy. So it didn't get any scrutiny. And now what they're doing, what social media companies are doing, is anyone that goes against the mainstream narrative or the establishment narrative of white privilege gets censored by social media companies because they only want one side of the story. So basically, to a degree, the establishment, which is kind of left, owns the court of public opinion. Now, for a while, the internet was kind of a Wild West kind of thing, where you can put up an opinion and, it could stick or it couldn't. Now they want to control that. And they've YouTube has purged a lot of accounts that they believe to be called white supremacist. Of course, they don't go in the other direction. Even certain groups that have called for physical violence against certain people they disagree with. I mean, you know what? I'll just go out and say it. They banned Stefan Molyneux, who's always been against peaceful resolution, whether you agree with him or not. But they allow Tariq Nasheed. Tariq Nasheed has often threatened people with physical violence and saying that, like he said against Tommy Sotomayor, that the guy should be stopped physically. Stefan Molyneux has never done anything such. So, like I said, it seems very one-sided. And who owns the court of public opinion in this country? I know I've gone kind of all over the place. And I said before, Donahue always allowed ideological people who disagreed with the left ideologically on his show. Oprah never did. I mean, if Oprah did, she never put an intellect on. She always put like maybe a white person that was kind of mousy, that had questions, but she would never put a Dinesh D'Souza on. She would never put a person on like Stefan Molyneux on. Because again, they wanted to control the narrative. And this is happening. Hey, I want to put out a shout out to Political Woodstock. I'm not trying to ignore you, by the way. It's just that I just wanted to get this out, but I'll give a shout out to Political Woodstock. We're going to do a show sooner or later when I have more time. Yesterday I didn't feel very good. It was my one day off and I did things I shouldn't have. But let me get back to the point here. My point is this. Can anyone be racist, or is that just a stigmatization for white people? And are we allowed to question the white privilege narrative without punishment? Are we restricted in what we're allowed to do and say? And is that really privilege? I'm just asking the question there. And again, this has been happening for years. And for a long time, the mainstream media could control the narrative without opposition. And then social media came along and they basically began to challenge the narrative. And the powers that be, because by this time, the leftists have become so powerful and ingrained and metastasized within these systems, both the private and the public sector, they began to say, hey, this stuff has to be shut down. And that's just what they did. And it seems against, look, I could be wrong on this, but it seems against the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which allows for public accommodations. The 1964 Civil Rights Act was written in the spirit are with the 14th Amendment in mind, which is equal protection under the law. And if you as a group feel you're being maligned and being discredited, do you have the right? Because basically what the left is saying is we own the court of public opinion. We own the narrative. And is that the kind of society that you want to live in? They call people that oppose the narrative the intellectual dark web. Now, we really don't have a word for them, but they're not intellectual. They call them intellectual because they're emotional. The one side is emotional, the other side is intellectual. Anyway, I will go further into this. In Woodstock, I'm not ignoring you on purpose. And and she talked about Dr. Phil, and she talked about systematic racism, which again, it's a leftist talking point. But my question is this, and if I'm wrong, please tell me where I'm wrong. And this is the question: do people who oppose the white privilege narrative, do they have the right to the court of public opinion? Those who oppose it, do we have the right to the digital public square? Do we have that right? It seems like we don't. I could be wrong on this. Tell me where I'm wrong, and then I'll follow. I may do some follow-up videos on this, but I just want to know where I'm wrong. And can anyone be racist? This word right here. Anyone can be racist. Is that a true statement? Or is it only whites that can be stigmatized with racist? This is Brian with Transparency and Merit, wishing you all well. And hopefully we can have an open and honest discussion about these issues. Thank you and have a good day.